All right, I think we're just gonna go ahead and get started. Thanks again for being here. I'm Eric Ford, Director of Content Partnership at Vermont Public. I'm so happy to be here today to tell you a little bit more about the Made Here Fund. Hopefully you've had a chance to visit our website, um, Vermont Public slash Made Here Fund, which has all the basic details, which I'm gonna start just by going over a few of those kind of high level details. And then I'm here really to kind of answer your questions and see how I can help you figure out if this is a good fit for you. So once again, thanks so much. Just as a beginning way to talk about this fund, I started about 6 years ago at Vermont Public on the PBS side, and really have been focused since then on distribution and promotion of content that's made primarily on video. So this really is an expansion of that idea. Um, and the goal is to help people make content. So that's really what we're hoping to do. It's the number one thing, of course, that folks, as I talk to folks who are making content in the state, what they want to know about, what they want to have support with is funding. So appreciative and so glad that we're able to start a program like this. All right, let's get going, and this will be pretty quick. I wanted to leave a lot of time so that we could chat about questions that you might have and help give some clarification. All right, so very quickly, why are we doing this? I talked a little bit about that, but number one, to pass the mic. We, of course, tell our own stories here at Vermont Public and have for many years, but we realize that there is a lot of other amazing stories out there being created in all different mediums, and we want to be able to give people more of an opportunity to tell their own stories. We also want to increase equity. We want to make sure that there's a space for folks who may not have had the chance to tell their story in the past to be able to do so. And then also just to support local content creation and creators here in the state. We know how challenging it is to live outside of like a traditional structure that may exist in New York or LA or in other cities. And so to be able to live here and to do what you want to do and create the content you want to create here in the States. That's definitely a goal here with this funding support. And let's get into just the basics here. I'll try to cover as much as I can, but there's a lot of nuance here, and this is the first year that we're doing this. So I don't know that we have the answer to every question, but we're hoping to, at the very least, create a place where we can support you. So we're trying to be as open as possible. So things can shift, things will change, based on feedback and how this program rolls. We are really hoping this is an annual fund that continues to grow. So we want to grow with you and be supportive first and foremost. So the basics, this is an annual fund. So we are hoping to do this every year. Starts at $100,000 total funding. So again, this is a starting place. We are hoping to grow this year over year and see where we end up. This fund is open to any Vermont content creator, whether you're an individual or you work for an organization or part of a group. If you are part of a group or an organization, we just ask that you have one designated kind of person to be the point person for your application and your project, but it's open to anyone that lives in Vermont. We're not going to be, checking checking with you to make sure that you're a Vermont resident. We hope that you are, and that you're honest about that, of course. There is a priority designation as part of this fund. So it is open to any content creator, and we'll talk about what types of content as well. But we wanted to give priority, again, thinking about equity and the folks that aren't traditionally heard or seen on our platforms, to folks in the BIPOC community here in Vermont, or that live outside of Chittenden County. Vermont is entirely rural, but we're thinking about the most rural parts of the state, or under the age of 30. And what does priority mean? Well, it just means extra consideration. So all of the projects that are submitted in the application process will be put up against each other, and we'll be looking at all the different factors in them. So whether they meet a priority or they're an amazing pitch, all of them will be considered together. So just be thinking of that as you apply. Any kind of media-based content can be considered. So audio, video, anything in between. We're trying to keep it as open as possible because we want to be helpful. We want to be supportive of what you want to make and the kinds of content that you're thinking of making. So it could be short form digital video, it could be a podcast, it could be multimedia project, it could be traditional documentary or series. And not just documentary based content, it could be fiction as well. We want to try to be open and see what people are interested in making. That may shift over time, but for this year, we want to be really open and listen to your needs. The application portal is open now, and it's open until November 4th. So got plenty of time. This is the first year. That window may change in subsequent years, but hopefully this is enough time, being this is the first time you've heard about it, that you'll be able to submit an application. And that, again, is through the Made Here Fund page on our website. All right, continuing on. Talking a little bit more about the process here. Projects will be reviewed by a diverse panel that will consist of folks here at Vermont Public and community members. So we're working with members of the community to help, create an equitable scenario for review. So we're comparing the projects to each other, but we're all doing that as a group. So it won't be me making the decision, and it won't just be people here at Vermont Public. It'll be members of the community as well. This is where it gets a little bit tricky, just because we don't know what people are going to ask for. We do have $100,000 this year. We're hoping to fund at least 6 to 8 projects in the first year. Again, hard to know because we don't know what people are going to ask for. I think it would be safe to say don't ask for $100,000 because that's how much we have. Again, we want to try to be open. We want to understand what your needs are. You will need to present other funding sources that you have in place. So we can't be the sole funder of your project. We hope that we're one of the funders, and we hope to help in that way. We're just, again, it could be more projects in this, it could be less. It really depends on what folks ask for and what their needs are as we go through this process. Projects will be selected and announced in February of 2023. So once application period closes in November, we will be reviewing those projects through the end of the year. Through January, those projects that we want to put forth for possible funding will be brought to management here at Vermont Public, and we'll make decisions, and then we'll let everyone know in February. And then we're asking that projects must be completed within 2 years. So technically that would be the end of January 2025. And again, this is cyclical. So in the next year, it would be, within 2 years. That doesn't mean it needs to be 2 years to complete your project. It could be, you might have a 6-month long project. So you'll have to try to estimate how long you think it will take to complete your project, but we're hoping to fund projects that will be completed within a 2-year time frame. And then the projects, this is really important as well to understand, the projects that we fund would be owned by you, by the content creator. We do ask as a funding recipient that we are able to distribute your content first on whatever platform it makes sense to distribute it on, whether that's on demand, whether it's video, audio, linear, whatever one makes sense. Again, that gets complicated. You might have a distribution plan already in place, or being thoughtful about that might limit what you're able to do. When we say distribute first, we're really talking about this market in Vermont for Vermonters to see. That's really one of our goals, is not just to help makers, but to provide interesting stories to the people here in Vermont to see and listen to. So again, that's, how we distribute will be a separate discussion for those projects that are selected for funding. So it's not built into the funding that you receive, and it is, a conversation back and forth. So, we want to be open and we want to be supportive, but we also want to make sure that folks in Vermont can see your project and see the results of your work. It's really important. And we can talk more about that. I talked a little bit about this, but what kind of projects are we talking about? Any kind of media. We didn't want to define that too much, but we are a media-based organization. So if you're familiar with Vermont Public, the kinds of things we do, but we're also looking for different things. So audio, video, multimedia, anything in between, pitch it to us. Let's see if we can help you figure out how to fund it. These can be projects that are already in progress or brand new projects that you're just thinking about creating. So if you needed finishing funds, whether that's post-production work or equipment rental, anything like that, you just would want to outline what it is that you need in the application process. As I said, fiction or nonfiction work. So again, you don't see a lot of fiction-based content on public media. I mean, you do perhaps on Sunday nights if you're watching historical dramas on PBS, but again, we want to be supportive, we want to branch out, we want to tell stories that aren't being told, so we want to be open about that. So if you have something that's comedy-based or drama, let's see if we might be a good fit. And then lastly, this one again is hard. We purposely didn't define this, but we were looking mostly for projects that get at a truth about Vermont life. Well, what does that mean? Well, we don't want to define that actually. We want you to try to define that. Tell us what you think that means and how your project might fit into that. We're really interested in, stories that are about what's happening here in the state, whether in the past or now or the future. What is it that matters about to Vermonters? And again, we don't want to define it too much more. We want to leave that to you to tell us how you think your project fits that. And that's really it for the slides. That's really the top level basics. We can go through the application itself and kind of some of the things that you would see there. But again, just the basic information here can be found on vermontpbs.org/MadeHereFund, which is hopefully you've already found that because you made it here to this webinar. So hopefully that's how you found out about it. There you'll find all the basic info that we've talked about. There's the application portal, of course, where you can create an account if you haven't already. That's what I love about this application portal that we found. I actually consulted quite a bit with Amy Cunningham at the Vermont Arts Council, which has been a huge support for me in developing this fund. I can't say enough about how much support the Arts Council has given us here in developing this. So kudos to them and thanks to them. So there's the application portal is through a software called Slide Room. It's fantastic, and it allows you to create an account, and then you can start your application, and you don't have to finish it. You can save your work. You can go back. There's several things there, that will take some consideration and time, some things that you'll have to upload, like budgets, that sort of thing. So again, it's a great portal, but it's hopefully has the flexibility where you can work in that space and then, complete your work and, when you're ready to, before November 4th, of course. There's an FAQ, so tried to answer some of the questions ahead of time. Some of them I've discussed already, but and then maybe today from questions that you have brought up, we'll expand the FAQ. Hopefully that's a good starter. There's also a link to the sample agreement. So it really is like what you would sign off on if you receive funding. So we wanted to be just as transparent as we could about that. And then an editorial policy. So this is one thing where we are a public media organization. We have codes of integrity and editorial policies. We just ask that you review them and understand them. We want to make sure that whatever you're working on, if funded, will actually be viable for our platforms. So again, it's fairly straightforward stuff. Some of it has to do with FCC things, but mostly has to do with kind of how we go about presenting the kinds of content that we present here on public media. I'm happy to talk more about that. And then any help or questions that I can offer in this process, please reach out. Email is definitely the best way to reach me. Not in the office every day, near a phone, but happy to try and answer your questions. Just give me a shout via email. Happy to try and help and know that we don't have all of the answers probably just because this is the first time we're doing it, but we really we really hope that we can grow this program and over time mold it into what really is helpful for you. That's our goal. I'm going to go ahead and stop. That's it for my slides. So I'm going to stop the share. And then I've got, I see there's some questions here. I've got several questions here. And then in the Q&A, and I'm going to go ahead and read those and then try and answer them. We'll see if I see if I know enough about what we have going on to help answer your questions. First question is an anonymous question. Does the content need to be what is traditional PBS type? For example, can it include adult humor or a clear, non-objective angle? And can we apply for finishing funds? So 2 questions there. The first question is, you know, yes and no, traditional PBS type. I mean, I think, you know, as I said, like read through the Code of Integrity and Ethics policy. I think, you know, it's part of what you have to read through in order to even apply. It's not that much, you know, it's a few pages. I think that gives you a really clear basis for like what would work on our platforms. You know, there's certain things like adult humor. It could work in context, let's say over the web, where there's not as many you know, regulations via, you know, like over the air broadcast. But again, you know, we are a public media organization, so there's certain things that we would want to fund that would be more in line with our own Code of Integrity. So I think it's important to review that. And yes, you can apply for finishing funds. So it doesn't have to be, it can be for something in progress that you're working on now, or it could be something brand new. Here's something from Ariel Goodman. Thanks so much for the webinar. Lifelong Vermonter working on a feature-length doc about dairy farm workers. That sounds great. Love to apply, but fear most feature-length docs take much longer to complete than 2 years. Additionally, commitment to premiere would be limiting for a feature-length doc because of needing to premiere at festivals and larger distribution companies. This is a great question. Totally understand feature-length docs within a 2-year time frame might be tough if you're just starting now. I know that sometimes those can take years to do. So that's a really good question. This fund may not be the best for you if the time frame doesn't work. You know, unfortunately, we had to put some sort of parameter on it because it's an annual cycle. And we need to, you know, in order to continue to get funding, we need to, you know, be able to show people the results, quite honestly. So if you had an in-progress project that you think you could finish within 2 years, that could be a good fit. But if you can't within 2 years, I think that would be a challenge for sure. Needing to premiere on our platforms, I totally get the idea that, you know, perhaps you have a market-based festival that needs a premiere. If you are trying to distribute nationally, I understand that. You know, I have a lot of conversations with folks that are trying to do that. We don't want to be a burden, but also we had to put parameters around. We really are concerned about helping local content creators, but we also want to provide stories for people in Vermont to see and hear. So I would just say, if you don't think that fits neatly, and again, what does premiere mean? It means in the market. So, you know, we would hope that we would be able to show it first in our market, and we can talk about it. We're flexible. So I would say, you know, the goal would be for us to premiere your content first, but call it out. Like if you put an asterisk in your application and say, you know, here's how this would be limiting, here's what my goals are, you know, like that's totally fine to do. Because as I said, this is new, we're just starting this. So if overwhelmingly people are like, that's going to be an issue, we might consider shifting that. But you know, that's our goal, is to be able to say, you know, it's your content, you own it, it's yours to do what you want with it, but we want to be able to show it to folks here in Vermont. All right, next question from Hallie. Does content creator relate to those running social media campaigns? It's an interesting question. I think, again, we want to be open. We want to be open. So if your social media campaign contains audio and video, absolutely. As long as it's not, you know, it's hard to know exactly what you mean by social media campaign. If it campaign as in it's for a commercial entity, like it's advertising something, again, I would just refer you to read the code of ethics and integrity that we have as part of the application to just understand like how the content might play on platforms. But absolutely, we're looking for content to put on non-traditional public media platforms. We're trying to build out TikTok right now and Instagram, and we're on Facebook. We're using YouTube, and we really are really interested in reaching all Vermonters, and we know that Vermonters are there and perhaps not watching traditional platforms. So yeah, we're really looking for folks who want to pitch interesting projects that are not on those traditional platforms for sure. Hope that answers your question. And again, like feel free to ask it again, ask again if it didn't quite hit the mark on your questions. I got a question from Robbie Lepser. Hey Robbie, good to hear from you. Glad you're here. I will say also, it's just nice to see a lot of familiar names here in the webinar. I can't see you, but I'm just psyched that you're all here. This is great. Okay. Two-part question. Given that you envision 6 to 10 projects to be funded annually out of a total of 100,000, would it be correct to assume that grant awards would be in the 10 to 15 range? Again, hard to say, but that's reasonable. I think, again, when you're talking about audio and you're talking about video, or you're talking about multimedia rather, there's different budgets, so if you're making a podcast, your budget's going to be very different than someone making a feature-length documentary. So again, it's hard to say. I would imagine if you were gonna, and we definitely offer partial funding. So if you were going to ask for, say, $50,000 and we really liked your project, it's unlikely that we would fund $50,000 worth of your project, because that would mean we'd only be able to fund a couple of projects. But we could say, this project's amazing and we're going to give you partial funding, and then explain why, and then work with you on kind of what that would be for. And yes, I mean, we really understand that we're not in some cases, again, if we're talking about audio and video, their budgets really range here. Recognizing that, and this is not a 100% funding situation at all, nor is it meant to be. It's definitely, you're right, Robbie, this is partial funding. So that's why you own the project, we don't. It's your project, we want to help you make your project. So the ownership lies with you. I totally recognize that this is not going to fund your whole project, nor should it. And in fact, as you go through the application process, you'll see a budget section. And I just want to call out the budget section. I'm not going to review it visually, but you'll see that where we ask you to upload a budget worksheet. It's very simple, but it does indicate that you need to provide, where your other funding is, and quite specifically that there needs to be other funding. So we are very purposely, not funding whole projects. But we are providing funding for projects. So as you think about budgeting, you want to be really specific. What is your specific need? What are you looking for? And what specifically can we help you with? Robbie's second part here, asking for a premiere project that's partially funding a film. It could put you in a bind. Yes, I totally get that. And again, like if you're on a national path for your distribution, let's talk. Nothing in this year is really a deal breaker. Let's talk about it. So there is flexibility. Let's absolutely talk, because I don't want people to, again, I don't want to waste your time. And I think that's the thing to understand. Just given the immense interest, even in this webinar, this is going to be very competitive. And we for sure don't have as much money as we hope to. We hope to expand this annually, because I know how much it takes to make content. So really recognizing that, but we're going to try to help as many people as we can. That's really the important thing. All right, here's a question from Shauna Hill. Colleagues and I are in the mental health professions, making a big leap into content creation. We don't know a lot about how these funding programs work. We're working on 2 different Projects, can we apply for 2 separate projects? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. There's no limits to, and then actually there was another question right after that about the same thing. Yes, absolutely. You could submit multiple projects. Um, they could be different or related. I think it makes the most sense to submit them separately if they're separate projects. Absolutely. So yes, yeah, and I would mention too also, you don't have to, if you apply, whether you receive funding or don't receive funding, you can apply in the next cycle. So we're not, people won't drop off if they, even if they've received funding. Like we're going to look at all the projects as they stand and compare to each other in each cycle, right? So submit as many different projects as you want. Again, it's your time, so I want to, if you have the time and interest to do that, and you have a bunch of different things you're working on, absolutely, and you think that they fit the guidelines well, please do. I should say, and this is another thing to point out, again, in our interest in being open as we can, in the year one, not knowing exactly what people are looking for. We could also be open to production support. What does that mean? Well, ask us. I think that's the key there, is to ask us, what do you need? Do you need a studio space? Do you need some equipment? Do you need some production support, editing support? I think, we're open to that. I'd love to get to a place where we could support with staffing and funding as at the same time, because then the funding can more directly support you as a maker to live and make work. Like that's the direction I'd love to see this go. We just need to build to that. We have limited staff and resources who are working on their own projects, but please ask. There's a section in the budgeting section to ask if you need non-monetary support for your projects. That wasn't a question, but I just thought I would interject that. All right, here's a question from Seth. Sorry if I'm going on and on. I hope this is helpful for you. I'm trying to get to all the questions here. Are the applications project-based, not individual-based? Can one person submit multiple applications? Yes. So again, one person could submit for multiple projects. If you have the time to submit and you think the projects are a good fit, absolutely. Here's a question from Angela Snow. Hey, Angela. Great to have you here. I wish I could see everybody, but hopefully we can do things like this more in person, although it is convenient not to have to drive all over the state to do this. Projects have to have other funding. Is there a specific percentage of the budget that's a requirement? Self-funding is okay. Yes, so again, trying this out for the first time, not going to be specific there. There is no specific percentage of the budget that we would need for you to be funded or that we would fund. Again, it's so hard until we get through a cycle or two to know, our goal is to fund as many projects as we can in a cycle. So we're saying 6 to 8, but that could be 4, it could be 20. It's really hard to know until people ask and we find projects that really fit our criteria. If we say, wow, this really fits our priority designations, this really is going to resonate with audiences, this is what we want to fund. So it's really hard until we know. We do ask that, we're not the sole source of funding. And yes, self-funding is great. I mean, any other funding source, as long as you just kind of delineate what it is and where it's coming from. And I think that also is a good point about the code of ethics and integrity. We would ask for any project that gets distributed to reveal all of your funding sources. It's really important to just be aware of who funded the project and letting the public know that, and then also making sure that it's not a conflict of interest, and that's something that it can be a fine line, but those folks who've made content, especially if you've made content for public media, may know more about that. And I'm happy to provide, there's a lot more resources that I could provide you about that if you're interested. Another thing you can do, which I think is really helpful if you're a video maker, go to Google and just type in PBS Redbook. The Redbook is just a huge resource about underwriting, funding, all the different things you can or cannot do. And again, those are just as a guideline. All right, moving on. I tend to go on. We've got great questions here, so I'm glad that I can answer most of them so far. We'll see. Uh, Corinne, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Has a question. When you say any media, does it mean that it has to be something you could be shared on BPR or PBS? Does it have to be an audio component and or digital? Great question. Um, you know, we were talking about this internally, and we were kind of like, what wouldn't be fundable? Like, I don't think a puppet show would be fundable, but maybe audio or video about a puppet show would be. So I don't know if that helps, but media in its traditional sense, is either on existing or developing platforms. So short digital interstitial content, Instagram videos, something for TikTok, something that's 2 minutes, something that's 2 hours, a podcast or an audio series, or maybe it's interactive. Like maybe you're making a multimedia app. I mean, that at this point, we're willing to be as broad as we can because we want to hear from you. We want to hear what's most helpful. And so just because it's not where you imagine Vermont Public might be now doesn't mean that's actually where we need to be, the places that we aren't. So, I would just say +1 for anyone making short digital or multimedia or social based content for sure. Here's Hallie has a question. If we are a first year business, how much should we add to the application since we only have 2 years to complete the project in full? If the end goal is to build up and create our main street, should I call out individual projects? That is, I'm not sure how to answer that question as it's phrased. I would just say read through the application and read through the guidelines. And if things don't make sense, reach out to me. I think it's detailed pretty clearly. But yes, you only have 2 years to complete your project, and it needs to be a media project, media-based project. So, calling out individual projects is best. If you've got media that's part of some other bigger project, it's best to just keep it focused in on the media part of that project. I don't know if I answered your question. I hope so. Here's a question from Hallie. If we're a small gift shop business, but making content is part of our business model, what sort of initiatives could we do that weigh against someone doing a documentary on social issues? That's an interesting question. So I would say if you're a business and you're making video about your business, that probably wouldn't qualify for this grant just because it falls into and again, I would just direct you to the Code of Ethics and Integrity policy. Like we're really looking for stories that are unaffiliated with commercial entities. But if you're a business that's making content that's not about your business or related to your business, it's just about people doing things in your community or in Vermont, that could be viable. So again, it's like, if you've seen public media, you have a good sense of the kind of content that would work on platforms. If you haven't, I urge you to check us out and look at what kind of things you're seeing, because I think that'll give you a sense. But really, that code of integrity and editorial policy information will help guide you on the type of projects that you think that would be most viable. Jim House has a question. Hey, Jim, great to hear from you. Glad you're here. For visual media, is there preferred length for broadcast? No, there isn't. If you're going to make something specific for broadcast, that's great. We're not forcing people down a certain distribution platform. There may be times in the future where strategically we want to focus on a certain subject or a certain platform, but for now we're completely open. For those of you who've made content for linear broadcast, whether it's radio or radio is a little bit more flexible and much shorter for linear. But if you're talking about video-based broadcast, there's kind of the traditional lengths of 26 minutes, 46 seconds, or 56 minutes and change. And not really these days. We're pretty flexible. If it's over 2 hours, that's going to be it's a challenge. quite honestly, just because we don't have the space on those traditional platforms for linear. But again, like on demand should be part of that. So again, as we think more about the increasing audience in on demand viewing and the decreasing audience of linear broadcast, length doesn't matter as much, to be honest. We will air stuff even now that's 2 or 5 minutes all the way up to 2 hours. So here's a question from Jim Lockridge. Hey Jim, glad that you're here. Does Vermont Public explore collaborative content creation too? I'm working on a documentary that will need to screen privately and have a premiere process. So first showing is problematic, but the interview content could be serialized. I mean, those are great questions. I think I've heard several times about the first premiere status. I would say just like call it out and tell us specifically what will work and what won't. The distribution piece, as I mentioned at the beginning, is not part of. I know in the agreement to get the funding, it does say you'll premiere with us, but we may even want to tweak that a little bit just to give it a little bit more flexibility. I'm hearing that as feedback, so I will take a look at that, what it says in the agreement, to make sure that there is flexibility. Our goal is to premiere, for lack of a better term, your work on a platform that we're affiliated with. But let's talk. I think that we are definitely into collaborative content creation. I think that's a little bit less of a straightforward path. Co-production is something that kind of lives outside of this particular grant. This grant really is about providing you funding to make what you want. And I think, on the production facility side, we might be able to help with production facilitation. But as far as the creative itself, really we want to help you make what you want. And our goal is to do more co-production work for sure. But I think for this particular grant stream, this is about us providing support for you to make stuff. But yes, Jim, let's talk about what other opportunities there are, even if it's just in distribution and promotion too. So that's the other thing, we've been doing and will continue to do, is to help distribute and promote content that's already made. But here we want to help you. Question from Erica, housekeeper Erica. Great to hear from you. So glad you're here. Will the committee be deciding funding based on the submitted budget, or will your committee consider funding a percentage of a requested amount? Great question. I think it's very fluid. So what I'm imagining is that partial funding would absolutely be possible. So, I think what I can already tell, and I already know just based on interest, that there's going to be a lot of folks applying. And we already, wish that we had more than $100,000 to give out. And I'm hoping that grows. And so I think, yes, what we will do is we'll look at all of the factors. We'll look at, first and foremost, how amazing the project proposal is and what you've presented to us, the idea that you've presented, how clear, how workable it is, how relevant it is, how it fits into priority designations, all those factors. If you've got sample work, all those things will add to our consideration. And most likely, if it helps folks, which I'm sure it would, we would definitely consider partial funding. Someone's asking if we'll be able to tell the truth about life in Vermont, or will it be censored? That's a good question. I hope we can tell the truth. Again, this is about what you want to do, not what we want to do. So we want to be there to support what you want to create. If you're talking about traditional censorship, as in like words you can't say on television and radio, I mean, yeah, that's in play. If the content that you're creating, if your plan or goal is to distribute on those traditional platforms, there's not as much leeway as far as what you can and can't say. As far as editing, we're not there to edit your project. What we're hoping, and this is again, first time we're doing this, is that we'll work together with the folks whose projects are funded throughout the cycle of their project, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, to provide support. So I'll be there to help answer questions, check in, learn about progress, and we're hoping we give you enough information up front that you would create a project that would be viable to be distributed. And so that's, again, I would just refer back to the ethics and code of integrity policy. It's not a lot, it's just a few pages. Check it out. But yeah, that would be our hope, is to distribute the thing that you want to make. Question from Andrea Melville. Hey, Andrea. Oh man, good to see you here. It's been a while. How many applications / projects can we submit? We haven't really put a limit on that. Again, like I'm starting to get nervous as I think about the perhaps hundreds of proposals that we will have to review, but that's on us. You know, so perhaps in the future we would put a cap on that. But for now, you know, if you have, you know, 3 or 4, I mean, if you submit 10 projects, wow, you got a lot of things going on. And perhaps, you know, if you've got other funding sources for all those projects, like, wow, that's amazing. So I think, you know, again, think about that. Think about your budgeting and the fact that we will present partial funding and are looking to have other funding sources called out in your projects. So if you have, you know, a bunch of stuff in the pipeline, submit it. Love to hear about it. Here's anonymous attendee. I'd love to hear more about the Vermont public distribution. Maintaining premier status for film festivals is important. What does distribution mean? I mean, it means anything and everything. It really depends on what distribution platform makes sense for your particular project. So if it lends itself to web or social or on demand, you know, linear, it really does depend on the project. I understand, like if you're submitting to a market festival, and again, there's actually very few festivals that put those limitations on needing to premiere. But if that's the case, like call it out. Say, in my distribution plan, these are my limitations. Like let's talk about it. And being that this is probably the 4th or 5th time just today that this has been brought up, it's something that I'm thinking a lot about and something that we may need to revise, just because, I don't know, the whole goal is to be helpful at the same time that we have projects that we can share with Vermonters, you know. So I think, you know, I would just say, think about that, because if we get 400 applications and the majority of them have no limitations on distribution, you know, that would be a consideration as we select projects. Because my understanding, just knowing many of the people here on this call, you have amazing work to share. And so it's going to be incredibly hard the selection process is going to be really hard. There's going to be a lot of great things. So I think, you know, again, think about that. If you're, you know, if there are barriers to us to being able to distribute, it may be challenging, being that there are projects that don't have those barriers. So that's really your, you know, when you think about how you're applying, think about those other folks that are also applying. All right, we're getting down to it. We've got about 10 minutes left. We got some more questions here. I'm going to try to go as quickly as I can. Ben's asking, your application question 10 refers to a proposed end date. What if I'd like to start an ongoing project, like a monthly podcast? That is a great question, and one that we probably didn't think of. And I'm trying to think about how best to phrase that. I would just say, if we're able to kickstart your project, you know, and it can premiere within, you know, by the end of that 2-year period, that would be ideal. If it's something that you plan, you know, that we could fund and then it's ongoing after, it doesn't need to end, you know, doesn't need to end if it's an ongoing project. So again, like, this is the first time we're doing this, learning along with you. Just call it out. Call it out in the process where we ask you to describe your project and say, you know, here's what I've got, here's what I'm interested in. And as long as we can understand that, we're going to be flexible. Amit is asking a question. Would a comparative study of life in Vermont in contrast to another state or city be eligible? Yeah, I absolutely. I think, you know, we tried to really give a prompt, a way for you to kind of think or frame the kind of content we'd be looking for, as in like what would be relatable to our Vermont audience. And obviously people in Vermont are like everyone else. They're watching everything. They're watching Marvel movies and Netflix and all of those things. But, you know, in thinking about us being public media and having a conversation, having a story exchange locally, I think absolutely that could fit into that. So yeah, I think, you know, just, you know, call out in your creative, you know, in your narrative, describe your project and how you think that will positively impact the folks here in the state. All right, next question, anonymous question. I work at a small public access organization interested in making educational and informative videos. And they run a small documentary camp for teens. If we applied for a digital video series, will we need each individual episode laid out in our application? No, I would say pitch the general idea and give examples. You know, I don't imagine that you'd have it all sorted out. Some folks may not even have like a reel or demo or anything. They might just have past work and a description. I mean, that's really the bulk of this application, is the like describing how you fit into the parameters of the app, of this fund. So yeah, you don't have to have it all figured out, but we just want to be able to, you know, if you can paint the picture of what this is going to look like and give us some examples, that's going to be the most valuable. Here's a question from Willow. Oh, just thanking us for this. So you're welcome. I'm so happy to, honestly, so happy and excited to have this as a resource. Is there any advantage to applying early, or folks who submit on November 4th? No, because this is the first time we're talking about it, we wanted to just give a really long window. That window could change in subsequent years, although the timing for other things that we have going on seems to work. So it is a really long window. There's no advantage to applying early other than just if you want to get it out of the way. As I said, you can go in and create an account and you can start some things and save it. You can save your work and you can come back in. You know, like the challenge always is if like something is funky and not working and you're waiting till the last minute, that might be a challenge. We did get really great advice to not end the application period on a weekend, so I can actually help be helpful and be online and available if there are last minute issues. But yeah, we won't start review until after the submission period closes. Here's a question from Anonymous. Would you explain the need for the project to have another exterior source of funding if needs could be met by an initial grant not to exceed 10 to 15K? That's a good question. I think we want to show, trying to think of the best way to frame this. This probably isn't the fund for folks that have never made content before. This really, you know, we really want you to show that you're going to have success here. And one of the best ways to show success is that you have other folks that are, you know, whether it's self-funded or others that are interested in supporting your project. That's what we want to see. We want to see that there's other support, that it's not just us supporting this project. So we're, you know, there is risk. There's always going to be risk in anything like this. Things could go awry. We get that. But I think showing other funding sources just shows that there's other commitment and interest in the project. So that's ideal. Here's a question from Annette. Can funding be collaborative with other funders? Yeah, I think so. I think just detail it in your budget worksheet. So if there's specific funding that's coming in, or if it's for general funding, you know, you're going to want to show, again, it doesn't need to be super detailed, but like, you know, how much are you paying yourself? How much are you paying crew? How much are rentals? Any sort of fees or, you know, equipment, anything that would be, you know, kind of hard costs. You want to kind of detail that, and then show how other folks are supporting your project, whether it's specific or general. So just detail it. But yes, absolutely could be collaborative. Question from Lauren, writing on behalf of Waterways Stage. Funding this year allowed us to create a digital classroom to learn about client science. That sounds great. And create their own 10-minute plays about what they're learning. Very cool. Awesome. Thanks for sharing. I'll check it out. Yes, and please send me an email too, because that's the best way for me to keep track. Here's a question from Rob. Hey, Rob. Hope you're doing well. What kind of Vermont public resources are available? That's a great question. It's really TBD. I think it depends on your ask. I would say be as specific as possible. It's really hard to know based on like where our staff's at with their own work and projects and but we're open to it. We just can't say specifically. So I would say if you have a specific production support ask, please throw it out there. We may or may not be able to help. Another question from Erica. Ideally, how long would Vermont Public want for exclusive distribution? I think that again is another conversation. Not forever, for a good amount of time. Not specific enough, I know, but it really depends on the type of content, your overall distribution plan, where you're headed with it, how we can support you, and how we can share this with our audience. And that's why we've really left that distribution conversation for after. So once that would just be a separate conversation with myself and the funded project once we got to that point. So flexible, we'll work together with you. That's typically how we approach it now, like with Made Here, the series, if you're familiar with that on the PBS side. Each of those films that's part of that series is an individual conversation. So that's what I would hope to do here. Another question. I know we've got just a few more minutes, so I'm trying to get through them. They're great questions. Thank you for being engaged here. Are you looking for mostly experienced established content creators or people with similar experience waiting to dive in? I mean, quite honestly, I think if you go through the application process, the questions that we're asking and the information we're looking for is for people that are experienced content creators. We'll have other streams in the future that we'll get to. I hope I hope in the future we'll have time and space to talk about those, where we're talking more about on the education, learning, and capacity building side. But this program is really, because we're looking for other funding sources, because we're looking for things like budgets, it really is going to be more for folks that have made content before, even if you've made it a few times. Again, it's not doesn't go super deep, but try it out, check it out, and see if it's for you. Question from Nalima. Hey, Nalima. Do you think international projects that focus on universal themes have a chance? Possibly. I think, if you can make a case that it directly correlates to Vermonters or would have interest for Vermonters, give it a shot. Again, I think we're really looking, it's so hard to know until we see what people apply. I think in cycles 2 and 3, when we're able to kind of say, here are the projects, here's what got funded, people will have a much better idea. And I hate to waste anyone's time, of course, but it does look like there will be a lot of interest in this. So it will be very competitive, but I'd say, try it, give it a shot. Question from Jennifer. Hey, Jennifer. So great to hear from you. Does this kind of grant require a fiscal sponsor? That's a great question. I think I would say no. I mean, we're going to be funding you, whether it's you or an organization. So if you're able to accept funding on your own, you don't have to be a nonprofit or have a fiscal agent. You could be a business. You could have your own business, or you could just be an individual. So no. Maybe I'm wrong saying that, but that's my understanding. Here's a question from Brian. Do you think it's worthwhile asking for, say, 500 to 1,500 if that's all that's needed? Will lower investment impact projects be considered? Absolutely. I think, we could, we want to fund as many people as possible. So if you only need a small amount, absolutely apply. There's no minimum, just knowing that we have 100,000. The last few minutes, I'm going to try to lightning round. Bess O'Brien. Hey, Bess. Budgets for a feature film that could be up to 200K. Asking Vermont Public for 15 to 20 seems reasonable. That's different from a smaller budget that may cost 10 in total. Yes, we will take total budgets into consideration, right? So if you just make your pitch, say this is how much I'm looking for, this is my total budget. We're asking for your total budget anyway, so we'll see that it's kind of baked in. But it's perfectly reasonable that 15, 20,000 for something that has a 200K budget, that could be your ask, and less for a $10,000 budget. Absolutely. Question from Willow: would Made Here funds be more likely to be awarded to a filmmaker making a short film as opposed to a feature length, or both? I think it varies. You know, it really depends. I think it's just about the strongest pitch. The they're all going to be compared to each other regardless of length or platform. I mean, we have audience goals that we're trying to hit. I think some of those are called out in the priority designations, which is really important to understand. If you're from the BIPOC community, if you're under 30, or if you're outside of Chittenden County, you're going to have the ability to be weighted higher in this process. I'm going to go over just a little bit more. I want to try to answer these last few questions. I know it's now 4 o'clock, so if you have to jump off, that's okay. This is all being recorded, and it'll be up on the page in the next few days. So hopefully this has been helpful. Oh, and also the other part of Willow's question, the Made Here mandate to have funded projects completed. Yes, so we're hoping that the projects will be completed within 2 years. As we go through cycles, there's just basic management issues that relate to infrastructure that really need to have kind of an end goal. But again, call it out. Let us know what you're interested in and what works. Andrea, can chosen projects use VP crew members to support the budget shortfalls? Yeah, I mean, that's again where we're in that kind of gray area where if you need non-monetary source, call it out, or sorry, support, call it out. If you are looking for production support, not sure what we can provide, but we wanted to leave the door open. So call it out, see if that's possible. If it is, we would love to help. More likely, if it's more tangible, like equipment or a studio or, post-production, things like that, versus like, story crafting and, production support, that's probably less likely than just like, hands to help, which could be possible. Here's another question. Keep rolling. If I receive more funding after November, can I update the budget sheet? Well, at that point, applications will be closed. So the goal would be to have as much information as you can before those applications closed. That would be ideal. Marcy asking on behalf of a young rural Vermont colleague who couldn't make it but wanted to propose a podcast. Can they propose for some of the funding to compensate their own work and time? If they don't need more than 10,000, do they have to show outside funding? Yes, I mean, we'd like to see other funding sources, even if it's self-funded, and you could even say that that's your time. But we would like to see some other skin in the game just to feel confident that projects can be completed and delivered. I would love for people to pay themselves to make content. That is the direction I would love for this to go. And I think production support on our end is key to help support that. But I think, if you can pay yourself to make content, that's sustainable. So absolutely do that. Question for Ben, is it worth applying if the content I'm making isn't made specifically about Vermont? I would say give it a shot. I mean, we want to have this kind of conversation about what's happening here in the state, but if you can, pitch that it's relatable, please do. If you want to get in touch with follow-up, reach out to me. If you go to the Made Here Fund page at vermontpublic.org, my contact information is there. It's eford@vermontpublic.org. That's my email. It's Eric Ford. You can just Google search it too, but yes, you can get in touch with me for follow-up. Chris, having never received a grant before, are there tax implications for the content creator? Whew, that is a good question. Probably there are. I would say there definitely is. I think if you're receiving funding for creating something, the tax piece is going to be on you. I'm assuming we would have to report that, just like any other funding source that you would receive, that you're getting funding. So I guess that depends on your status. If you have nonprofit status, you'd have a process for that. If you're a commercial entity or LLC, it's going to be on you to kind of understand what those implications would be, for sure. For docs is another question. Can you say what you want to be the first non-festival premiere, whereas a lot of festivals help bring attention when it's on Vermont Public? again, just, recognizing that first premiere or premiere on Vermont Public is something that we're going to be thinking about how to approach that, seeing that it may be a hurdle for some. Um, that's a good point. Maybe we just want to say would be the non-festival premiere, but I think, again, thinking about timeline, we want that stuff to get out there into the world, which is why there's a two-year maximum for your project. So we want to premiere that post that 2-year project. But let's talk about it. I think that's a great point. Maybe it's non-festival premiere. Corinne, will there be other opportunities to ask questions, or will there be opportunities for feedback on our project ideas? I think right now this is all that's planned. That doesn't mean that there isn't, we've got a few months rolling this out, so there might be other opportunities. I would say if you've got individual, at this point, just based on capacity, I probably don't have time for one-on-one meetings, but if you have quick questions that you want to ask me via email, I'm happy to try and answer those. So if there is interest in doing another one of these, I'd be happy to do it. And even more, like a more casual arrangement, happy to do that. Annette's asking, is the funding available every year or the projects are due in 2 years? So yes, so it'll be a rolling thing. And again, in year 2, some things may change. Year 1, we're trying this out to see what works and what doesn't. But yes, this is going to be an annual fund. We're hoping it grows from 100,000, but it will start at 100,000. And then the projects need to be completed within a 2-year time frame. So by the end of January 2025. But that doesn't mean your project couldn't be 3 months, 6 months, whatever you think you need, but within those 2 years. Delima, are samples, trailers accepted in the application? Absolutely. We would love to see samples. It's always helpful to see work samples. Past work, you'll see in the application, there's places to upload or link to past work, or, if you've got rough cuts, or audio samples, trailers, anything. We love to see that. It's really helpful. Last question, maybe the last question from Sean. Made content can play at Vermont Made Festival to premiere in Vermont and then play at other festivals and then play on distribution. I mean, oh, I see you're maybe, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the Made Here Film Festival is interesting. Another thing, it's a partnership with the Vermont International Film Festival. It's their program. It happens every year in April. Absolutely could premiere there. And it could play other festivals. I think, let's talk about what works for your project. I mean, I think that's the goal, is to try to be open and flexible, but also know that we need to have parameters to try to manage this, because it can get untenable. So yeah, let's talk. That could be absolutely a venue to premiere. And again, content creator owns the content that's created, not us. You are the copyright holder. I think that's our last question. Thanks for those that have stuck it out and stayed with us here. I really appreciate that. I'm just going to put my contact info back up on the screen here. Just at the last few minutes. Thank you so much for being here and spending this time with us. I'm really looking forward to seeing your projects. All right, take care.